Avery Caldwell, 34, stared at her phone in disbelief. The family group chat had been updated, and her name was conspicuously absent from the Christmas dinner list. Her brother James had accidentally sent her the revised guest list, one that no longer included her. What they didn't know was that Avery, as lead counsel for Montgomery Industries, held the key to the $3.2 million contract their struggling family business desperately needed. She glanced at the contract on her desk, her finger hovering over the recommend termination button. They had canceled her Christmas. Perhaps it was time she canceled something of theirs. Hey everyone, before I dive deeper into what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this family drama already, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about family betrayal and sweet, sweet karma. Trust me, you'll want to see how this one ends. The Caldwell family had always been picture perfect, at least on the surface. Avery's parents, Robert and Eleanor Caldwell, had built Caldwell Construction from the ground up, transforming it from a small residential contractor to a regional commercial construction firm. Their Christmas cards always showed the perfect family, successful parents' golden boy son, James, with his beautiful wife, Melissa. And then there was Avery, the perpetual disappointment, despite her Harvard law degree and senior position in Williams and Mitchell, one of Boston's most prestigious law firms. Growing up in their suburban Massachusetts home, the pattern had been established early. James could do no wrong while Avery constantly fought for attention. When James scored the winning touchdown in high school, her parents threw a massive party. When Avery was valedictorian, they merely commented that she should get out more. When James joined the family business after barely passing his business classes at a state college, he was immediately given a vice president title. When Avery announced her acceptance to Harvard Law, her father asked if she really wanted to be stuck reading boring documents all day. "We just want you to be happy, honey," her mother would say, while simultaneously dismissing every accomplishment that didn't fit their vision of happiness. That vision, of course, included working for Caldwell Construction, marrying young, and producing grandchildren, 3 things Avery had failed to do. Her childhood bedroom told the story plainly. While James's room remained a shrine to his mediocre athletic achievements, trophies for participation proudly displayed Avery's had been converted to a home office the moment she left for college. Family photos throughout the house prominently featured James, Melissa, and their constant attempts to conceive a child, while Avery appeared primarily in group shots, often partially cropped out. After law school, Avery had made a deliberate choice to specialize in corporate contract law, partially because she excelled at it, but also because it took her far from construction. She'd built her own life in a sleek downtown Boston apartment filled with modern art and uncluttered surfaces, the opposite of her parents' colonial-style home, with its overstuffed furniture and endless family photos. Her colleagues respected her. Her clients valued her. Only her family seemed unable to see her worth. The irony wasn't lost on her when Montgomery Industries became her client 3 years ago. The major commercial development company was exactly the type of client Caldwell Construction had been trying to land for years. But Avery kept her professional and family lives separate, never mentioning the connection to either side. It wasn't out of malice at first. It was simply maintaining professional boundaries. The current $3.2 million contract for a new office complex had been in negotiation for months. Avery had carefully recused herself from the bidding process when Caldwell Construction submitted their proposal, citing potential conflict of interest. Her firm's partners respected her ethical stance, assigning another attorney to that aspect while keeping Avery as lead counsel for the broader relationship. What no one at Caldwell Construction knew was that their proposal had made it to the final round, largely due to their competitive pricing that bordered on unsustainable, but represented their desperate bid to land a major client. that could save their increasingly precarious finances. Avery had been genuinely excited about this Christmas gathering. She'd missed last year's due to a major case, and despite the usual family dynamics, she'd found herself longing for some connection. She'd purchased thoughtful gifts for everyone, even Melissa, who had never bothered to hide her disdain for Avery's career-focused lifestyle. She'd even taken cooking classes to improve her contribution to the traditional family dinner beyond store-bought desserts that her mother always fixed anyway. The first hint that something was wrong came 3 days ago, a cryptic text from Melissa. "Just a heads up, there's some drama about Christmas. Not sure if anyone's told you yet." Avery had immediately called her mother, who assured her everything was fine. They were just finalizing some details. James hadn't returned her calls, which wasn't unusual but still felt off given Melissa's warning. And now this mistakenly shared message had revealed the truth. The finalized details meant Avery was no longer welcome. As she scrolled through the conversation that clearly wasn't meant for her, I's phrases jumped out smaller, gathering this year more intimate, focusing on immediate family. The guest list included her parents James and Melissa, 2 aunts and their families, and even neighbors, everyone except her. As Avery set down her phone, a notification from Montgomery Industries popped up on her laptop. Final contract review required Caldwell Construction proposal. Urgent. Avery's fingers hovered over her keyboard, the Montgomery Industries email still flashing on her screen, but her mind was stuck on the family group chat. She scrolled back through the messages, searching for some explanation, some offhand comment about why she'd been excluded. There was nothing specific, just the revised guest list with her name conspicuously absent. She took a deep breath and typed a message to the group. "Hey, I noticed I'm not on the Christmas list anymore. Change of plans." She watched as the message was delivered, then read by each family member. Minutes passed with no response. Finally, her mother replied, "We're just keeping it small this year, dear. We thought with your busy schedule you'd appreciate the break." A transparent lie. The guest list included 17 people, hardly keeping it small. Avery felt a knot forming in her stomach as she replied, "Looks like quite a gathering from the list," James shared. "Did I miss something?" This time her father responded, "Now, Avery, don't make this difficult. We just finalized arrangements and the house will be quite full." The house had 5 bedrooms and a finished basement. They'd hosted 30 people for her grandmother's 80th birthday. Space wasn't the issue. Avery switched tactics and called her mother directly. "Hi, sweetie," Eleanor answered her voice, overly cheerful. "I was just about to call you." "Mom, what's going on with Christmas?" "Why am I suddenly uninvited?" "Oh, it's nothing personal," Eleanor said, her voice dropping to the tone she used when trying to soften a blow. "We just thought with everything going on with James and Melissa's fertility treatments, we should keep things low stress this year." "And I'm stressful?" Avery asked, her throat tightening. "Well, you know how competitive things can get between you and James. And Melissa is in a very fragile state right now. Competitive. The word hung in the air. Avery hadn't competed with James since they were children. She'd given up on that decades ago when she realized the contest was rigged. "I don't understand," Avery said. "I haven't even seen James since Dad's birthday in April." "How could I possibly be causing stress?" Eleanor sighed. "It's complicated, Avery. Maybe we can do lunch in January, just us girls." Before Avery could respond, she heard her father's voice in the background, followed by her mother saying, "I have to go, dear. We'll talk soon," before hanging up. Frustrated, Avery tried calling James directly. To her surprise, he answered. "What's up, counselor?" he said, using the nickname that had once been affectionate but had soured over the years into something vaguely mocking. "Why am I uninvited to Christmas?" James Avery asked, skipping any pretense. There was a pause, then James sighed. "Look, it wasn't my call, okay? Melissa's been having a rough time with the fertility stuff, and she just doesn't want any tension." "What tension? I barely interact with Melissa." "That's kind of the point," James said, his voice hardening. You come in with your fancy job and your perfect life, never asking about our struggles, always talking about your cases and your clients. I ask about your lives all the time, Avery protested. You and Melissa change the subject whenever I bring up my work because it makes everyone uncomfortable, James snapped. Dad's company is barely staying afloat, and you're over there making partner while refusing to help the family business. Avery was stunned. I've offered legal advice multiple times. Dad always says he doesn't need a fancy lawyer looking over his contracts. That's not what I mean, and you know it, James said. You have connections, clients. You could throw some business our way, but you never do. The irony of this accusation, while Montgomery Industries' contract sat in her inbox, was not lost on Avery. So that's it. I'm uninvited because I'm successful. No, James. Hesitated, then continued. Melissa overheard you at Dad's birthday. You were talking to Aunt Sarah about how some women choose careers over babies. Melissa was devastated. She thought you were taking a dig at her. Avery's jaw dropped. That's absolutely not what happened. Sarah was pressuring me about not being married, and I was defending my choices, not attacking Melissa's. Well, that's not how she took it, James said. Look, it's just one Christmas. Things will blow over. As they talked, Avery heard a notification ping on her phone. Checking quickly, she saw a Facebook alert her cousin tagging her mother in photos of Christmas preparation. The caption read, "Getting ready for the big Caldwell Christmas bash. All 23 of us are going to have a blast. 23, not 17. The list had grown and she was still excluded. James, I just saw Tracy's Facebook post. 23 people. There was a long pause. Yeah, well, some last-minute additions. But still, no room for your sister, Avery said quietly. Avery, no, I get it now, she interrupted. This isn't about space or Melissa's feelings. You just don't want me there. She heard muffled voices, then recognized Melissa's voice in the background. Is that her? Tell her to get over herself already. She doesn't fit in, she never has. James didn't even bother to cover the phone. I will, babe. The casual cruelty of it took Avery's breath away. Years of feeling like an outsider crystallized in that moment of overheard dismissal. James, she said, her voice suddenly steady, tell Mom and Dad I got the message. Loud and clear. She ended the call and sat in silence for several minutes processing what had just happened. Then, almost mechanically, she turned to her computer and opened the Montgomery Industries email. The contract details filled her screen. $3.2 million for the office complex construction pending final approval. Caldwell Construction was the provisional choice based primarily on their desperately low bid. As senior counsel, Avery had significant influence over the final vendor selection. She had recused herself from directly advocating for any contractor due to her family connection, but her recommendation against a vendor would carry substantial weight, especially if she could demonstrate legitimate concerns. She stared at her computer screen, a plan forming. They had canceled her Christmas invitation. Perhaps it was time to return the favor. Avery didn't sleep that night. She sat in her home office, surrounded by contract documents, company profiles, and financial reports. What had started as an emotional reaction was transforming into something more calculated. If she was going to do this, if she was really going to steer the contract away from her family's company, she needed legitimate ethical grounds. The question that kept circling in her mind, was this revenge or was it justice? By morning, fueled by coffee and righteous indignation, she had compiled a spreadsheet of every construction company that had bid on the Montgomery project. Caldwell Construction had underbid the nearest competitor by nearly 12%, a margin that raised red flags in her professional opinion. How could they deliver quality work at that price point? She called her colleague Marcus Chen, who had handled the bidding evaluation due to her recusal. Avery, it's 7 a.m. on a Saturday, he answered groggily. Sorry to wake you, but I need to discuss the Montgomery contract. I've been reviewing the bids. I thought you recused yourself from that part, Marcus said, sounding more alert. I did, but something's bothering me about Caldwell's bid. It's significantly under market rate. That's why they're getting the contract, Marcus replied. Montgomery is thrilled about the savings. But that's my concern, Avery continued. I've seen this before. Companies underbid to get the contract, then either cut corners or hit the client with change orders and extras that drive the final price well above the original quote. There was a pause on the line. You have a point, but do you have any evidence this is Caldwell's strategy? Avery hesitated. She didn't. Not yet. I'm concerned about their financial stability. A company that underbids this dramatically might be desperate for cash flow. That's worth investigating. Marcus agreed. But Avery, I have to ask, is this personal? You've been very careful about your connection to Caldwell until now. The question hit hard. Was she letting personal feelings cloud her professional judgment? Avery took a deep breath. I've maintained my recusal from advocating for any specific contractor, she said carefully. But if I have legitimate concerns about a vendor's ability to fulfill their contract obligations, I have a duty to my client to raise those issues. Fair enough, Marcus said. I'll look into their financials more deeply. Anything specific I should examine. Avery thought about what she knew of her family's business. Her father was old-school resistant to modern accounting practices. James had taken over more of the financial side in recent years, despite having barely passed his business classes. Check for consistent cash flow issues, she suggested. Look at their completion rate for projects over the last 3 years, and whether they've had any significant liens or disputes with subcontractors. After hanging up, Avery felt a twinge of guilt. Was she weaponizing her professional position? But the more she thought about it, the more convinced she became that her concerns were legitimate. If Caldwell Construction was underbidding out of desperation, Montgomery Industries deserved to know the risks. She spent the next several hours researching alternative construction companies that had bid on the project. Wilson Builders had a sterling reputation and a bid only 10% higher than Caldwell's. Their financial statements showed stability, and their project completion rate was nearly perfect. If Montgomery needed to pivot from Caldwell, Wilson would be the logical choice. Around noon, her phone rang. It was her father. She let it go to voicemail, then listened to his message. Avery, your mother's upset about your conversation with James. This Christmas decision wasn't personal, so don't make it into a bigger deal than it is. On another note, we're close to landing a major contract that could really turn things around for us. Maybe once that's finalized, we can all celebrate together. Call me back. The casual way he dismissed her exclusion from the family holiday, followed immediately by business talk, crystallized something in Avery's mind. To her family, she had always been an afterthought, except when they needed something from her. Her laptop pinged with an email from Marcus. He had done a preliminary investigation into Caldwell Construction and found several red flags: 3 mechanics' liens filed by subcontractors in the past year, 2 projects that ran significantly over schedule, and a concerning pattern. Things of underbidding, followed by expensive change orders. These findings would justify recommending caution to Montgomery. Marcus wrote, "Do you want to discuss this with Richard Barrett?" Barrett was Montgomery's CEO and the ultimate decision-maker on the contract. Avery typed her response carefully. "Yes, I think we should present these concerns to Richard. Can you set up a meeting for Monday morning? I'll prepare a comprehensive risk assessment." As she hit send, another layer of her plan fell into place. She wasn't fabricating concerns, she was doing her job by identifying legitimate risks for her client. If that happened to align with personal justice, so be it. That evening her mother called. "Avery, darling, your father said he left you a message." "Did you get it?" "I did," Avery replied coolly. "Well, he mentioned the exciting contract news. Isn't that wonderful? It could really save the company." "That's great, Mom," Avery said, keeping her voice neutral. "I'm sure it will be a nice Christmas bonus for everyone." There was an uncomfortable pause. "Honey, about Christmas." "I hope you understand. It's just that Melissa—" "I understand perfectly, Mom," Avery interrupted. "You've made your priorities clear. I respect your decision, and I hope you'll respect mine to make other plans." "What other plans? You're not spending Christmas alone, are you? That would just be pitiful." The casual cruelty of the comment stung. "I have friends, Mom, people who actually enjoy my company. Don't be dramatic, Avery. It's not becoming." After ending the call, Avery returned to her research with renewed determination. By Sunday evening, she had compiled a comprehensive report on Caldwell Construction's financial instability project, delays, quality issues, and potential risks to Montgomery Industries. She also prepared a comparative analysis of the other top contenders, highlighting Wilson Builders' superior track record and reasonable pricing. The report was factual, professional, and damning. On Monday morning, as she prepared for her meeting with Richard Barrett, Avery received a text from James. "Dad says the Montgomery contract is nearly finalized. We're celebrating tonight." "Too bad you'll miss this too." Attached was a photo of champagne chilling in an ice bucket. The smug assumption that their deal was secure solidified Avery's resolve. She grabbed her report and headed to the meeting, ready to present the facts that would shift the contract away from her family's business. It wasn't just revenge anymore, it was the right thing to do. The Montgomery Industries executive boardroom exuded power and wealth, exactly what Caldwell Construction desperately needed. Richard Barrett, CEO, sat at the head of the oval table, flanked by his chief operating officer and facilities director. Marcus had arranged the meeting, but it was Avery who would lead the presentation as senior counsel. "Avery, Marcus tells me you have concerns about our contractor selection for the new office complex." Barrett began, his tone neutral but curious. "Yes," Richard Avery replied, distributing copies of her report. "In reviewing the final bid documents, I identified several risk factors that I believe warrant serious consideration before proceeding." She walked them methodically through her findings. Caldwell Construction's pattern of underbidding, followed by expensive change orders. Their cash flow issues evidenced by late payments to subcontractors. Their recent project delays, and questionable quality control practices. Most concerning, Avery concluded, is that their bid is 12% below market rate for a project of this scope. While cost savings are obviously attractive, my experience suggests this level of underbidding often indicates either financial desperation or an intention to recoup costs through aggressive change orders once the project is underway. Barrett frowned, studying the financial analysis. "These are significant concerns. What alternatives do we have at this stage?" Marcus stepped in. "We've included a comparative analysis of our other finalists. Wilson Builders submitted a bid only 10% higher than Caldwell's, with a much stronger financial position and project completion record. And a stellar safety record," Avery added. 0 OSHA violations in the past 5 years compared to Caldwell's 3 minor citations. The meeting continued for nearly 2 hours, with Avery answering questions and elaborating on specific points of concern. She was meticulously careful to present only factual information, never allowing her personal connection to Caldwell Construction to influence her analysis. By the end, Barrett was convinced. "I appreciate your thoroughness, Avery. We'll delay finalizing the contract with Caldwell and take another look at Wilson. Can you prepare a transition memo outlining the shift without exposing us to any liability?" "Absolutely," Avery replied, maintaining her professional demeanor despite the surge of vindication she felt. As she left the meeting, her phone buzzed with a text from her father. "Just heard the Montgomery contract is going to be officially announced this week. James says it's in the bag. This could save the company, Avery. Maybe you could stop by the office for the announcement. Family should be together for moments like this." The irony wasn't lost on her. Excluded from Christmas, but invited to share their professional triumph. She didn't respond. That evening, as Avery worked late at her office, drafting the transition memo, her phone rang repeatedly, first James, then her father, then her mother. She let them all go to voicemail. Finally, curiosity got the better of her and she listened to the messages. James sounded panicked. "Avery, something's wrong with the Montgomery deal." They were supposed to send the final contract today, but instead they requested additional financial documentation and references. "Do you know anything about this? Call me." Her father was more direct. "Avery, I know you have contacts at Montgomery. We need your help. Whatever they're concerned about, we can address it. This contract is make or break for us." Her mother's message was purely emotional manipulation. "Darling, your father is beside himself with worry. I know things have been strained, but surely you wouldn't let family pride get in the way of helping in a crisis. Call us, please." Avery set her phone down, emotions warring within her. Part of her felt a savage satisfaction at their distress, while another part questioned if she'd gone too far. But she hadn't fabricated concerns. Everything in her report was factual. She'd simply done her job protecting her client from a potentially risky contractor. The next morning, she received an email from Barrett confirming the decision to proceed with Wilson Builders. Caldwell Construction would be notified by close of business. The email concluded with praise for Avery's diligence. "Your careful analysis likely saved us significant headaches down the road. This is why we value your counsel." Throughout the day, the calls from her family increased in frequency and desperation. By evening, her father's tone had shifted from pleading to accusation. "I don't know what you did, but Montgomery just informed us we lost the contract. After all the work we put into that bid, James is devastated. If you had any influence in this decision, Avery, I hope you can live with yourself." As Christmas approached, Avery found herself alone in her apartment, wrapping presents for her assistant and colleagues while Christmas movies played in the background. The gifts she'd purchased for her family remained in shopping bags in her closet. The cooking classes she'd taken to improve her holiday contributions had been a waste. On Christmas Eve, as she sipped wine and watched the snow fall over Boston, her phone buzzed with a notification from the local business journal's website. "Caldwell Construction loses major contract to competitor." The article detailed how Montgomery Industries had awarded its $3.2 million office complex project to Wilson Builders after extensive due diligence revealed concerns about Caldwell's financial stability and project management capabilities. The article quoted an anonymous source from Montgomery. "We conducted thorough risk assessment and determined another vendor better met our needs for this critical project." Avery closed her laptop, mixed emotions swirling. She had succeeded in her revenge. Her family's company had lost the contract that might have saved them from their financial troubles. But instead of satisfaction, she felt hollow. Her phone buzzed again, a text from a number she didn't recognize. "This is Melissa. I hope you're happy now. You've ruined Christmas for everyone. I always knew you were jealous of what James and I have." Avery didn't respond, but the accusation stuck with her. Was this really about jealousy or justice for years of being treated as an afterthought? As she prepared for bed, she wondered if she'd gone too far, if in seeking revenge she'd become the villain in her own story. But then she remembered Melissa's casual cruelty, tell her to get over herself already. She doesn't fit in, she never has, and her mother's dismissal, that would just be pitiful. No, she hadn't created this situation. She'd simply allowed her family to experience the consequences of their actions, both personal and professional. As senior counsel for Montgomery Industries, she had a duty to protect her clients' interests. She had fulfilled that duty with integrity, presenting only factual information. If that information happened to derail her family's plans while they were busy excluding her from theirs, well, that was karma at work. Hey everyone, I know that was intense. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between family loyalty and doing what's right professionally? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And stay tuned, this family drama is about to get even more complicated as the fallout begins. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to find out what happens next. The week between Christmas and New Year's passed in eerie silence. Avery's family, usually quick to blame her for any perceived slight, seemed to have gone completely dark. No accusatory texts from James, no guilt-tripping calls from her mother, not even a disappointed email from her father. The silence was more unnerving than confrontation would have been. Avery threw herself into work, volunteering to cover for colleagues on vacation. The distraction was welcome, but thoughts of her family's situation intruded constantly. Had she gone too far? Was Caldwell Construction truly in such dire straits that losing the Montgomery contract could destroy them? On December 30th, the silence finally broke. Her office phone rang, the caller ID showed Caldwell Construction. Avery Caldwell. She answered professionally, heart-pounding. "Miss Caldwell, this is Patricia Wilkins from Boston Business Journal," said an unfamiliar voice. "I'm calling to get your comment on the allegations against Caldwell Construction." Avery's breath caught. "What allegations?" "We received an anonymous tip with documentation showing Caldwell Construction has been cutting corners on safety regulations and possibly falsifying inspection reports on several projects," Wilkins explained. "Since you're listed as family and a prominent attorney, I wanted to get your perspective." Avery's mind raced. She hadn't sent any anonymous tips. Her revenge had been limited to the Montgomery contract. "I have no comment at this time," she replied carefully. "I'm not involved in Caldwell Construction's operations and have no knowledge of their business practices." "Interesting," Wilkins said. "Because our source suggested you might have inside information, given your position at Williams and Mitchell and your family connection." "Your source is mistaken," Avery said firmly. "I maintain strict professional boundaries between my work and my family relationships." After ending the call, Avery immediately searched for news about Caldwell Construction. Nothing had been published yet, but if Wilkins was making calls, a story was imminent. She debated warning her family but decided against it. She hadn't been the source of the leak, and any contact now might be misconstrued as admission of involvement. The next morning, the story broke across local business news: Caldwell Construction under investigation following whistleblower claims. The article detailed allegations that the company had falsified safety reports, used substandard materials, and bribed a local inspector to overlook code violations on 3 recent projects. Avery read the article with growing horror. This went far beyond losing one contract. These allegations could destroy the company entirely and potentially lead to criminal charges. And while she had highlighted legitimate concerns about Caldwell's business practices to Montgomery Industries, she had never uncovered anything this damning. Her phone rang James. "What the hell did you do?" he demanded, before she could even speak. "I didn't do anything," James Avery replied, keeping her voice steady. "I just saw the article myself." "Bullshit," James shouted. "First, Montgomery drops us with no explanation, then suddenly we're being investigated for fraud. This has your fingerprints all over it." "I had nothing to do with any whistleblower report," Avery insisted. "Yes, Montgomery was my client, but I recused myself from vendor decisions due to conflict of interest." "Oh, please," James scoffed. "You expect me to believe that? You've always been jealous that I took over the company instead of you. This is your revenge for being excluded from one Christmas gathering, destroying the family business." Before Avery could respond, she heard her father in the background. "Let me talk to her." Robert Caldwell's voice came on the line, uncharacteristically shaky. "Avery, if you know anything about these allegations, you need to tell us now. The investigators were here this morning. They're looking at everything, our books, our project files, even my personal emails." "Dad, I swear I had nothing to do with this investigation," Avery said firmly. "I didn't send any anonymous tips or whistleblower reports. "But you work with Montgomery," he pressed. "You must know why they dropped our contract at the last minute." Avery hesitated. "As senior counsel, I have a duty to advise my clients about potential risks. When I saw Caldwell's bid was significantly below market rate, I raised legitimate concerns about the company's financial stability and project management. That's all." The silence on the other end was deafening. Finally, her father spoke, his voice cold. "So, you did sabotage us? Your own family?" "No, Dad. I did my job. I presented factual information to my client. If that information led them to choose another contractor, it's because the concerns were valid. We needed that contract, Avery. The company is struggling. We might not survive this investigation on top of losing Montgomery." For the first time, guilt twisted in Avery's stomach. She had wanted to teach her family a lesson, not destroy their livelihood. "I'm sorry about the investigation, Dad, but I had nothing to do with that, and my actions with Montgomery were professionally ethical." "Professionally ethical?" he repeated bitterly. "Is that how you justify betraying your family?" The call ended, leaving Avery shaken. Had she gone too far? The contract issue was one thing, but she hadn't intended to trigger a full investigation. Over the next 2 weeks, the situation deteriorated rapidly. Additional articles appeared detailing specific instances of safety violations and financial irregularities at Caldwell Construction. 3 other clients canceled pending contracts. Suppliers began demanding payment up front. Then came the bombshell. A follow-up expose revealed financial improprieties centered specifically around James Caldwell. Bank records showed he had been siphoning company funds into personal accounts for years, disguising the transactions as vendor payments to shell companies he controlled. The article included quotes from former employees describing James's lavish spending on luxury cars and vacation homes, while the company struggled to meet payroll. One insider claimed James had been embezzling over $200,000 annually for at least 5 years. Avery was stunned. While she'd suspected her brother's financial management was questionable, she'd never imagined outright theft on this scale. This explained why the company had been underbidding projects so desperately. They were in far worse financial shape than anyone realized, thanks to James's embezzlement. Her phone rang again, her mother this time. "Have you seen the news?" Eleanor asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "About James? Yes, I just read it." "It's all true," Eleanor said, shocking Avery into silence. "Your father confronted him and he admitted everything. He's been stealing from the company for years. The Montgomery contract was supposed to be his way of covering the shortfall before anyone noticed." "Mom, I owe you an apology," Eleanor interrupted. "When you raised concerns to Montgomery, you were doing your job. You couldn't have known what James was doing, but your professional instincts were right." Caldwell Construction wasn't stable. The conversation continued, Eleanor revealing that James's wife, Melissa, had already moved out, taking their joint savings with her. The family was in crisis, with Robert facing the possible collapse of his life's work and criminal charges against his son. "We need your help," Avery Eleanor finally said. "Your father won't ask, but I am. We need legal advice from someone we can trust." Avery closed her eyes, conflicting emotions washing over her. "I'll do what I can, Mom, but I can't represent the company directly. There would be too many conflicts of interest with my position at Williams and Mitchell." "Just advice, then," Eleanor said. "And maybe you could come over tomorrow. Your father is devastated, and despite everything, I think he needs all the family support he can get right now." After hanging up, Avery sat in her office, processing the unexpected turn of events. Her revenge had been aimed at making her family feel a fraction of the exclusion. She'd felt a canceled contract to mirror her canceled Christmas invitation. Instead, it had triggered a cascade of revelations that exposed her brother's crimes and threatened to destroy her parents' legacy. The next day, as Avery drove to her parents' house, she wondered what awaited her. Recrimination, blame a family in pieces. Whatever happened, she knew one thing for certain: the Caldwell family would never be the same again. The Caldwell family home, usually decorated lavishly for the holidays, looked abandoned. Christmas lights hung limply unlit, and the wreath on the door was starting to brown. Avery hesitated before ringing the doorbell, steeling herself for what awaited inside. Her mother answered, looking a decade older than when Avery had last seen her. Eleanor's usually perfect hair was disheveled, her face devoid of makeup. "Thank you for coming," she said, simply leading Avery into the living room. Robert Caldwell sat in his armchair, staring at financial documents spread across the coffee table. He looked up briefly when Avery entered, nodded once, then returned to his papers. "Dad," Avery said, unsure how to begin. "Your brother's been arrested," Robert said without preamble, his voice flat. "Turned himself in this morning after his lawyer negotiated the terms. Embezzlement, fraud, falsifying business records. They're still determining the full extent of the charges." Avery sat down slowly. "I'm sorry, Dad." "Are you?" he asked, finally meeting her eyes. "You were right about the company's financial instability. You were right to warn Montgomery. I was just too blind to see it." "I didn't know about James's embezzlement," Avery said. "I just saw red flags in the bid numbers." Robert nodded. "Your professional instincts were better than my parental ones. I always thought James was following in my footsteps, building on what I created. Instead, he was hollowing it out from the inside, using my trust against me." Eleanor brought in coffee, her hands shaking slightly as she set down the tray. "Melissa's filed for divorce," she added. "Her lawyer contacted us yesterday. She's claiming she had no knowledge of James's financial activities." "Do you believe her?" Avery asked. Eleanor and Robert exchanged glances. "We don't know what to believe anymore," Eleanor admitted. The separate vacation she took to the Maldives last year cost over $30,000. That money came from somewhere. They spoke for hours, piecing together the extent of James's deception. He had created phantom vendors-approved inflated invoices from conspirators who kicked back percentages and manipulated project budgets to create slush funds he could divert, all while presenting himself as the dutiful son saving the family business. "The worst part," Robert said, his voice cracking, "is that we encouraged it. We praised his business acumen when projects came in under budget. We believed him when he said certain vendors were overcharging. We promoted him to CFO and gave him complete financial control because he was family. While pushing away the one family member who might have spotted the problem sooner," Eleanor added quietly, looking at Avery. "We owe you an apology for that too." The directness of her mother's acknowledgement took Avery by surprise. Eleanor had never been one to admit mistakes, especially regarding her children. "What happens now?" Avery asked. Robert sighed heavily. "The company's finished. Even if we avoid bankruptcy, our reputation is destroyed. No one will contract with Caldwell Construction after this scandal. You could restructure," Avery suggested. "Rebrand under new management, implement strict financial controls, bring in a partner with a clean reputation to help restore trust." Robert looked at her curiously. "You've given this some thought." "I've been thinking about nothing else since the news broke," Avery admitted. The conversation was interrupted by the doorbell. Eleanor went to answer it, returning with Richard Barrett from Montgomery Industries. "Mr. Barrett," Robert said, standing awkwardly. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I apologize for the intrusion," Barrett said. "I was hoping to speak with both you and Avery." Avery tensed, uncertain why her client would seek out her family home. "Richard, I should disclose that I'm here in a personal capacity, not as Montgomery's counsel." Barrett nodded. "That's actually why I'm here. After the news about James Caldwell broke, I wanted to personally explain our decision process regarding the contract." He turned to Robert. "Mr. Caldwell, when we were evaluating bids, Avery properly recused herself from directly advocating for any contractor due to her family connection." However, when the evaluation team selected Caldwell Construction as the provisional winner, she did raise legitimate concerns about your bid being significantly below market rate. Robert nodded slowly. Those concerns were valid, as it turns out. Indeed, Barrett continued. What I want to make clear is that Avery behaved with complete professional integrity throughout the process. She presented factual information about potential risks and allowed our team to make the final decision. At no point did she reveal her family connection to other decision-makers or attempt to improperly influence the process. Robert looked at Avery, something like respect flickering in his eyes. She was doing her job. Exactly, Barrett said. In fact, given what's now come to light about the financial situation at Caldwell Construction, her diligence likely protected both Montgomery and your company from an even worse outcome had the contract proceeded. After Barrett left, a heavy silence filled the room. Finally, Robert spoke. You were right, Avery. About everything. Not about everything, Avery said softly. I let hurt feelings influence my timing. I could have raised those concerns earlier, worked with you privately to address them before the Montgomery decision. Instead, I waited until I felt wronged by the Christmas exclusion. Robert shook his head. Would I have listened? Would James have allowed me to listen? Or would we have dismissed your concerns as jealousy or meddling, the way we've dismissed so much of what you've tried to contribute over the years? Eleanor reached out. Taking Avery's hand, we've never given you the credit you deserve professionally or personally. We've always treated James as the heir and you as an afterthought. Why Avery asked the question she'd wanted to ask for decades, finally escaping. What did I ever do to make you favor him so completely? Her parents exchanged pained glances. Nothing, Robert finally admitted. You did nothing wrong. If anything, you were too capable, too independent. You didn't need us the way James did, so we poured our energy where we thought it was most needed. It was our failure, not yours. Tears pricked at Avery's eyes, not from the hurt of past exclusion, but from the unexpected balm of finally being seen, finally being acknowledged. Where do we go from here? She asked. Robert squared his shoulders, something of his old determination returning. Forward. Somehow. The company may be beyond saving, but this family doesn't have to be. If you're willing to give us another chance. Avery nodded slowly. I am, but things need to change. They already have, Eleanor said, gesturing around at their diminished circumstances. Everything's different now. As Avery drove home that evening, she reflected on the unexpected turn of events. She had sought revenge for being excluded from Christmas, only to find herself at the center of a family reckoning that went far deeper than holiday plans. The contract cancellation that was meant to be her revenge had instead exposed long-hidden truths and created an opening for genuine change. The family that had gathered for Christmas without her was now shattered. James facing criminal charges, Melissa gone, her parents confronting painful truths about their favoritism and blind spots. Yet, somehow in that shattering, Avery had found the recognition and respect she'd sought for years. It wasn't the justice she'd planned, but perhaps it was the justice they all needed. 6 months later, Avery stood in the reception area of what had once been Caldwell Construction. The sign on the door now read Caldwell and Wilson Developers, reflecting the partnership that had saved the company from complete collapse. After the scandal broke, Robert had faced a choice: declare bankruptcy or find a path forward. With Avery's guidance, he'd approached Thomas Wilson, owner of Wilson Builders, the company that had won the Montgomery contract. Wilson had been looking to expand into the commercial renovation market, where Caldwell still maintained some reputation despite the scandal. The merger arrangement allowed Robert to remain involved as a senior advisor, while Wilson took over day-to-day operations and financial control. Most importantly, it preserved jobs for the innocent Caldwell employees who had been blindsided by James's crimes. Miss Caldwell. The receptionist interrupted her thoughts. Your father is ready for you now. Avery nodded and walked to what had once been her father's grand corner office. The space was now divided into two smaller offices, her father's modest workspace and a conference room. Robert waited at the door, looking both older and somehow lighter than he had 6 months ago. Right on time, he said, with a small smile gesturing her inside. Thomas is joining us via video conference. The meeting was brief and productive, a review of a potential new contract that would be the largest since the restructuring. Thomas Wilson's face on the screen was businesslike but respectful as he discussed the opportunity with both Caldwells. With your legal background and your father's technical expertise, I think we're in good shape to land this, Wilson concluded. Avery, can your firm help with the final contract review? Actually, I've already cleared it with my partners, Avery replied. As long as we maintain proper disclosures about my family connection, they're comfortable with me advising on this deal. After the call ended, Robert turned to Avery. I never properly thanked you for all this. Without your connections and guidance, there would be no Caldwell and Wilson. You've thanked me plenty, Avery said, waving away his words. Besides, you're doing the hard work of rebuilding. With considerably less stress now that I'm not carrying the whole load, Robert admitted, and without James's complications. James had pleaded guilty to reduced charges in exchange for returning what remained of the embezzled funds and providing information about others involved in the scheme. He was serving a 3-year sentence at a minimum security facility. Melissa had finalized their divorce and moved to Florida with a surprisingly generous settlement that had raised eyebrows among investigators. Your mother wanted me to remind you about dinner on Sunday, Robert said as they walked out. She's making your favorite lasagna. The monthly family dinners had been Eleanor's idea, a small but significant step toward rebuilding family connections. They were sometimes awkward, occasionally emotional, but increasingly genuine as the months passed. I'll be there, Avery promised. Should I bring anything? Just yourself, Robert replied, then added with uncharacteristic vulnerability, that's always been enough, even when we failed to show it. Later that evening in her apartment, Avery found herself looking at the previous year's Christmas photos that her cousin had posted online images of a gathering she had been deliberately excluded from. The familiar sting had faded, replaced by a more complex understanding of her family's flaws and her own role in their shared story. The exclusion that had triggered her revenge now seemed almost trivial compared to what had followed the exposure of James's crimes, the near destruction of the family business, and the painful but necessary restructuring of family relationships. Her revenge had not played out as she'd intended. In seeking to punish her family for excluding her from Christmas, she had inadvertently set in motion events that forced them all to confront deeper truths. Her brother's crimes would likely have been exposed eventually, but her actions had accelerated the process, perhaps saving the company from complete destruction. More importantly, the crisis had created space for something new, a relationship with her parents based on mutual respect, rather than outdated expectations and disappointments. Robert now valued her professional expertise, while Eleanor had begun to see her as an individual rather than a failure to conform to family traditions. As she prepared for bed, Avery's phone chimed with an email notification. It was from Montgomery Industries. They were considering a new project and wanted to know if Caldwell and Wilson might be interested in bidding. Richard Barrett had added a personal note, "I've been impressed with the restructuring efforts. Might be time for a fresh start all around." Avery smiled as she forwarded the email to her father and Thomas Wilson. A year ago, she had canceled her family's contract in revenge for a canceled Christmas invitation. Now she had the opportunity to help them secure a new beginning. It wasn't the justice she had originally sought, but perhaps it was the justice they all needed, the painful but necessary dismantling of facades and false assumptions, followed by the chance to build something more authentic in their place. The following Sunday, as Avery drove to her parents' house for dinner, she reflected on how differently things might have turned out. If she had simply accepted her exclusion from Christmas, would James's embezzlement have continued until nothing remained of Caldwell Construction? If she had acted out of pure professional concern, rather than waiting until she felt personally wronged, could the company have been saved without public scandal? These questions had no clear answers, but Avery had made peace with her role in the complicated family drama. She had acted imperfectly, mixing personal hurt with professional duty, but the outcome had ultimately been necessary: painful truths exposed, false relationships dismantled, and the possibility of something more genuine taking their place. As she parked in her parents' driveway, no longer the grand family home, but a modest condo they downsized to after the scandal, Avery saw her mother watching for her arrival through the window. Eleanor waved her smile genuine, if still somewhat tentative. This was not the family Avery had grown up with, the picture-perfect facade, hiding toxic dynamics and secret betrayals. It was something new, still fragile, still finding its way forward. But it was real in a way their previous relationship had never been. Sometimes Avery reflected as she walked to the door, justice doesn't look like what you expected. Sometimes it looks like the painful but necessary dismantling of what was false to make room for what could be true. Hey everyone, that concludes my story about family betrayal, revenge, and ultimately redemption. I hope it resonated with some of you who've experienced complicated family dynamics. Have you ever witnessed karma come full circle in your own life, where justice eventually found its way? Even if not in the way you expected? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this tale of family justice struck a chord with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that explore the complicated reality of family relationships. And if you know someone who might appreciate this story, please share it with them. Thank you so much for listening to my experience, and remember, sometimes the most painful revelations create space for the most meaningful growth. Until next time,